What if the city that made you a king was already planning your funeral? Vice City glows like a fever dream, all chrome reflections and restless neon veins pulsing against the black tide of the Atlantic. Every night it hums with promises, fortune, lust, escape. But behind that shimmer, behind the slow drag of a cigarette in a shadowed club, or the soft laughter echoing through hotel corridors, something rotten grows. It starts as a whisper, a deal, a betrayal, a name. And for Vincent DeMarco, that whisper would become a storm. Vincent wasn't born into the throne. He carved it out of concrete and blood. The son of a dock worker, he learned early that the ocean gives and it takes, same as the streets. He sold watches first, then cars, then entire neighborhoods, each trade pushing him deeper into the city's bloodstream. By the late 80s, he was untouchable, the man who could make your fortune or erase your name. The press called him the gentleman of vice, but those who knew better called him the Kingpin. He wore linen suits in the color of bone, spoke softly, and never looked back when he walked away from a burning deal. His clubs stretched from Ocean Drive to Starfish Island, each one a cathedral of sin, champagne, chrome, and whispered debts. He had a way of making everyone feel chosen, but beneath that charm, behind every smile, was calculation. Vice City loved him for his grace and hated him for his power. It said the city doesn't destroy you all at once. It seduces you first. The night it all began, the air felt heavy, electric, like the city was holding its breath. Vincent sat alone at the end of a marble bar inside the Mirage, his newest club, staring through the glass at the rain. The storm outside washed neon into rivers of color across the streets, reds bleeding into blues, purples twisting into gold. A jazz record crackled in the corner, and the ice in his glass clicked softly against the rim. He was waiting for someone. Across the room, a woman danced alone, a slow sway, eyes half closed, cigarette trailing smoke like a ghost. Her name was Isabella Cruz. Once, she sang in Havana lounges. Now she sang for men like Vincent, men who could pay for beauty and keep it locked away. They said she was his weakness. Maybe she was, or maybe she was the mirror that showed him what he had become. When she finished her song, she walked to him, her heels tapping like a metronome for the dying hours of the night. "They're saying the Colombians moved on Ocean Beach," she murmured. "They're saying they've got backing from up north." Vincent's eyes didn't move. He swirled his drink, the amber liquid catching the light. "They can take the beach," he said. "The ocean always takes something." But his voice had a tremor in it, a small one, the kind that only comes from men who've seen the storm before and know it's coming back. Outside, a car engine idled too long, a sound too steady, too deliberate. That night, 3 of Vincent's men didn't make it home. Rumors moved through Vice like smoke. The docks were shifting, the shipments changing hands. A rival named Salazar, an old ghost from the Cuban corridors, was said to be building a new empire from the ashes of the old one, cleaner, colder, ruthless. And someone close to Vincent was feeding him names. The Kingpin had enemies before, but never ghosts. Vincent met his inner circle the next night, in a room with no windows, the air thick with cigar smoke and mistrust. Tommy Ricci, his oldest friend, his right hand since the days of stolen cars, leaned against the wall, eyes sharp. Across from him sat 2 lieutenants from Little Havana, brothers with matching gold watches and silent rage. "Somebody's leaking roots," Vincent said. "The Colombians hit the shipment before it even left port." Tommy's jaw tightened. "You think it's one of us?" Vincent looked up slowly. "I think it's someone who knows too much to be guessing." Silence filled the room. The sound of rain outside felt louder, heavier. "Salazar doesn't move without knowing the odds," Vincent said finally. "Somebody's giving him the odds." The brothers glanced at each other. One of them, Mateo, spoke first. "We've been loyal since the docks, Vince. You know that." "I know a lot of things," Vincent said quietly, "but I don't believe many anymore." He stood, and for a long time no one breathed. After that night, the streets of Vice began to change. Men disappeared, deals went quiet. The music in the Mirage grew slower, softer, like the city itself was mourning something it couldn't name. Vincent stopped showing up in public. He moved like a ghost, from penthouse to pier, from meeting to midnight drive, always one step ahead of something unseen. Isabella would wait in the club until dawn, her songs echoing through empty chairs and spilled drinks. "He doesn't sleep anymore," she told the bartender once. "He just listens, like he's waiting to hear his own name on someone else's tongue." Then came the call. It was 3 in the morning when the phone rang at Vincent's oceanfront suite. The waves outside crashed hard against the rocks, each one like a heartbeat in the dark. He answered on the second ring. "DeMarco," a voice said, low, calm, unfamiliar. "You don't know me, but I know what's coming for you." Vincent said nothing. The line crackled with the sound of rain. "The Colombians aren't your biggest problem," the voice continued. "It's the one sitting at your right hand." Then, silence. Vincent looked out at the water, his reflection fractured in the glass. For the first time in years, he felt the old fear again, the kind that doesn't scream, but whispers. By dawn, Tommy Ricci was gone. No one saw him leave the mansion on Starfish Island. No car pulled from the driveway, no guards reported movement. His house, when Vincent's men broke in, was empty, untouched. On the desk sat an envelope, sealed with wax. Inside, a photograph. Vincent and Tommy, 20 years younger, standing by a stolen Cadillac, laughing. On the back, written in pencil, "Every kingdom falls, brother. Some just take longer." The message wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. That night, the city's pulse quickened. Helicopters circled downtown. A warehouse fire lit up the sky over Little Haiti, one of Vincent's storage fronts. The police scanner crackled with words like narcotics, arms, federal involvement. The walls were closing in. Inside the Mirage, the lights flickered. Isabella was singing again, a slow, sorrowful song that felt more like a goodbye. Vincent stood by the window, watching his empire burn in reflection. He turned to her. "If you knew it would all end like this," he said, "would you still have stayed?" She smiled faintly, cigarette trembling between her fingers. "We all stay," she said, "until the lights go out." Vincent looked back at the street below, the sirens, the flashing blues chasing down the last ghosts of his reign. And in that moment, the Kingpin understood something cruel. Vice City doesn't bury its kings, it erases them. He picked up the phone, dialed a number he hadn't used in years. The line clicked open. "I need a meeting," he said. "No names, no records, just a boat and the truth." "Tomorrow night," the voice replied. "Pier 17. The next day crawled by in silence. Vincent's men vanished. His accounts froze. The mansion emptied. Only Isabella remained, humming an old Havana tune as she packed a single suitcase. When night came, the city seemed to hold its breath again. The ocean shimmered under the moonlight, all silver and sorrow. Vincent walked alone toward the pier, coat collar high against the wind. His shadow stretched long over the planks, distorted by the flickering street lamps. At the end of the dock waited a black car, engine running. Inside, 2 figures, faces obscured by the glow of dashboard light. One turned, Tommy Ricci, alive, calm, smiling. "Missed you, Vince," he said, voice smooth as glass. "Funny how the city never changes, just the names." Vincent stopped, the sea roaring behind him. "You sold me out." Tommy shrugged. "I adapted. You didn't." He stepped out of the car, the sound of his shoes sharp on the wood. "You built this city on charm and promises. But the world doesn't want gentlemen anymore. It wants survivors. Vincent's hand twitched near his jacket, the faintest motion, like memory. Then a single light flared across the water, the beam of a police boat slicing through the fog. Tommy looked past him and smiled wider. Right on time. Vincent's eyes narrowed. You called them. No, Tommy said softly. She did. From the shadows of the pier, a figure stepped forward, the silhouette of a woman in a white dress, cigarette glowing faintly in the dark. The waves broke harder now. The sirens grew louder, closing in, echoing across the harbor, like the city's final confession. Vincent took one slow step back, the neon reflection of the skyline rippling in his eyes. The night seemed to tighten around him, the music of Vice fading into the wind. And as the police boats drew closer, lights flashing red against the black water, he whispered something only the ocean could hear. Then, a gunshot. Or maybe it was just thunder. No one really remembers which came first. Only that by dawn, the Kingpin of Vice City was gone, and the ocean was quiet again. But somewhere, in the half-buried ruins of the mirage, a record still spins, the same song, the same voice fading into static. And if you listen close enough, past the sirens and the waves, you can almost hear him, laughing softly, as if the city had finally told its last lie. The ocean kept its secret that night. By morning, the tide rolled in slow and heavy, dragging fragments of the past onto the sand, a torn linen sleeve, a broken watch, a single gold cufflink glinting weakly in the sun. Vice City woke without mourning. It never did. It just replaced names with new ones, like peeling off old posters from a club wall. No body was found, no statement filed, just silence, the kind that hums like electricity after rain. But silence in Vice is never empty. It's a space waiting to be filled. 2 days later, Detective Armand Velez sat in his car outside the Mirage, watching the city reflect off the wet asphalt. He'd been on DeMarco's tail for years, long enough to know that men like him didn't just vanish. They dissolved. Velez took a drag from his cigarette, smoke curling through the morning light. The precinct called it a closed case. Kingpin dead, problem solved. But Velez could feel it. The story wasn't done. It was hiding in the walls. He stepped out, pushed open the club's heavy door. Inside, the air still carried perfume and regret. The record player was stopped, needle resting on dead wax. On the bar sat an untouched glass of bourbon, half evaporated. Velez muttered under his breath, "Even ghosts drink better than me." In a hotel off Washington Beach, Isabella Cruz was alive but quieter. She'd cut her hair, dyed it black, and hadn't sung a note since that night. The papers printed headlines about the fall of DeMarco, the rise of new cartels, the shifting tides of power. But to her, every story read like a lie. She'd watched it happen, the betrayal, the gunfire, the light in his eyes when the sirens hit. She thought it would bring peace. It didn't. Tommy Ricci had promised protection, a new start. "Vice forgets fast," he'd said, leaning against the balcony rail, his smile colder than the sea breeze. But Isabella had seen what was beneath that smile. The hunger, the guilt that never made it to his eyes. She turned from the window, poured herself a drink. "You can't build a kingdom from ashes," she whispered. But Tommy could, and he was trying. Starfish Island burned bright again. Parties, new faces, new rules. Tommy had taken what was left of DeMarco's empire and rebranded it. New clubs, new suppliers, new blood. To the press, he was a businessman with a golden touch. To the street, he was a man with no past. But every empire has ghosts. Late one night, as he stood by the window overlooking the city, he saw a reflection move behind him. A shadow just long enough to make him turn. Nothing there, just his own heartbeat, echoing in the glass. He picked up his drink, staring out over the water. "You're dead, Vince," he murmured. "Stay that way." The ocean didn't answer, but thunder rolled far out at sea, like laughter beneath the waves. Detective Velez found something the next week, a surveillance tape from the pier, time-stamped the night DeMarco vanished. The footage was grainy, distorted by fog. He could make out 3 figures, DeMarco, Ricci, and a woman in white. Then a flash, then static. He rewound it again and again, staring at the flicker before the flash. The woman's head tilted, not toward DeMarco but away, as if expecting something behind him. He paused the tape, zoomed in. Another silhouette, faint, distant, a 4th shape at the edge of the pier. He leaned back, exhaling. "Son of a bitch," he whispered. In a warehouse near Little Haiti, a meeting was taking place. Men in dark suits, cigars burning low, voices measured. Tommy sat at the head of the table, smiling that same politician's smile. "Distribution's ours," one of them said. "The Colombians back off. The docks are clean. It's over." Tommy nodded. "Nothing's over. We just stopped bleeding long enough to think we're alive." He poured himself a drink, didn't touch it. "We keep the ports, but we do it quiet. No bodies, no headlines." One of the lieutenants, a thick man with restless eyes, leaned forward. "And DeMarco's people?" Tommy's jaw twitched. "Gone." The man smirked. "You sure?" Tommy looked up slowly. "You want to go fish and be my guest?" The room fell silent again, the air heavy with the sound of unspoken names. Isabella visited the pier 3 nights later. The water smelled of gasoline and rain. She stood at the edge where the boards still bore the burn mark from that night. She dropped a flower into the waves, watched it spin, caught between tides. "Forgive me," she said softly. Behind her, footsteps. She didn't turn. "If you came to kill me, you're late." Velez stopped a few feet away. "You think I'm here for that?" She smiled faintly. "Everyone in this city's here for that." He took out a cigarette. "You were there that night. You saw it." She didn't answer, just stared out at the dark water. "Tell me what happened," he said. She looked back at him finally, eyes hollow but steady. "You wouldn't believe me." "Try me." "He didn't die," she said. Velez froze. "DeMarco?" She nodded once. "The ocean doesn't kill its own." Somewhere along the coastline, miles from the city, a fisherman found a wrecked boat wedged between coral and stone. Inside, a linen jacket soaked in salt and blood. No body. When Velez heard, he drove out to the docks himself. The boat was real, the evidence undeniable. But what chilled him wasn't what was found. It was what was missing. No ID, no records, no trace of DeMarco's fingerprints, almost as if someone had cleaned it after the fact. Someone who knew how to disappear. Tommy Ricci didn't believe in ghosts, but that week his phone started ringing at odd hours. No voice, just static. Sometimes, faintly beneath the noise, a whisper, Pier 17. He smashed the phone against the wall after the 5th call, but the whisper stayed in his head. The power grid failed across Vice one night, a blackout that silenced half the city. The skyline went dark, the ocean swallowing every light. For an hour, the city was blind. When the power returned, the world felt different. In that hour, someone had broken into Tommy's mansion. No alarms, no footprints. Just a single item missing from his study, the photograph he'd left on DeMarco's desk. The one with the message, "Every kingdom falls." Tommy didn't call the cops. He poured a drink and waited, hand trembling slightly as he lit a cigarette. "You're dead," he said to the empty room. "You're gone." But even as he said it, he could smell the ocean. Detective Velez met Isabella again at a diner near the airport. She was dressed in black, sunglasses hiding the wreck behind her eyes. "He's alive," she said, before he could even sit down, "and he's coming back." "Why tell me?" "Because I helped bury him." Velez leaned in. Then you'd better tell me everything, she sighed. You think Tommy killed him? No. He staged it, a setup for the feds. But Vincent, he saw it coming. He planned his own death before Tommy ever fired the shot. Velez frowned. You're saying he let it happen? He needed to disappear. You don't get to walk away from the throne. You burn it and vanish in the smoke. She looked up at him. He's not coming back for revenge, detective. He's coming back to finish what he started. 2 nights later, a body washed up on the sand near Viceport. Male, mid-40s, bullet wound to the head. The press called it another cartel hit. But Velez saw the photo and felt his stomach turn. The man had no face left to recognize, but the suit, it was DeMarco's color. That bone-white linen impossible to forget. The coroner's report came back clean. No fingerprints, no dental match. A ghost with a heartbeat. Tommy sat in the Mirage after hours, staring at the stage where Isabella once sang. The lights flickered weakly, reflecting off the empty glasses like broken halos. He poured another drink, whispering to no one, "You got what you wanted, Vince. You're free." A shadow moved in the doorway. "Am I?" a voice said. Tommy turned, breath catching. There he was, Vincent DeMarco, thinner, paler, eyes hollow but alive. For a long moment, neither man spoke, the silence between them heavier than gunfire. Tommy finally stood. "You're supposed to be dead." Vincent smiled faintly. "So are you." He walked closer, the air thick with ghosts and old smoke. "You took my crown," he said quietly, "but you never understood what it cost to wear it." Tommy's hand twitched near his jacket. "Don't do this." Vincent shook his head. "You already did." Then came the sound, faint, distant, like sirens rolling over the waves. "Feds are coming," Vincent said. "You invited them. I just made sure they knew your name." Tommy's face broke. Shock, fear, betrayal all crashing at once. "You set me up." Vincent's eyes were calm, almost kind. "No, I set you free." He turned toward the door, the blue-red glow of approaching lights painting the room in flickering sin. "Vice doesn't forgive," Vincent said, his voice fading into the echo. "It only trades debts." Outside, engines roared, doors slammed, shouts filled the night. And in the chaos, the Kingpin vanished again, swallowed by the same ocean that once tried to keep him. By dawn, the city was awake and hungry. Tommy Ricci was gone, the mansion stripped, the accounts empty. Isabella fled south. Detective Velez filed a report that no one believed. But in the quiet hours before sunrise, when the sea was calm and the neon flickered weakly against the mist, people swore they saw him. A figure walking along the shoreline, barefoot, suit torn, eyes fixed on the horizon. Vincent DeMarco. A man with no past, no future, just the city and its endless appetite for the living and the lost. Because in Vice City, nothing ends. It just begins again, under a different name. And somewhere beneath the hum of power lines and the sigh of the ocean, a voice whispers, "Every kingdom falls." The ocean was restless that night. Dark water colliding with the rocks like an argument that would never end. A storm had been circling for days, thick with the scent of salt, gasoline, and gunmetal. Somewhere out there, beneath the bruised sky, Vice City exhaled. The lights along the bay flickered like dying stars, and for the first time in years, it felt like the city itself was watching. Vincent DeMarco stood on the balcony of the Mirage, shirt unbuttoned, cigarette trembling between his fingers. The neon from Ocean Drive painted his face in red and violet streaks. He wasn't thinking about money or territory or power. Those were just tools. He was thinking about the sound Isabella made when she used to laugh. The kind of sound that didn't belong in a place like this. He wondered how something so soft ever found its way into a world that survived on cruelty. Inside the club, the air was heavy with perfume and menace. Men in linen suits whispered about new deals, new enemies, and old debts that refused to stay buried. The DJ's needle looped on a single haunting note, and everyone pretended not to notice. Vincent's right-hand man, Raul Vega, leaned against the bar, eyes scanning the room. "They're moving on the docks again," he said quietly. "Someone's feeding them our roots." Vincent didn't turn. "Then someone's trying to end me with my own blood." He flicked the cigarette into the rain and watched it die mid-air. Raul hesitated. "You think it's the Cubans? Or maybe the Colombians?" "No," Vincent said. "It's someone closer." The words lingered like a blade left on a table, untouched but undeniable. Outside, thunder cracked like gunfire. The storm rolled through the city's veins, flooding alleys and washing sins down the gutters. Every flicker of lightning illuminated another secret vice wanted to keep. A preacher shouted under a bridge, claiming redemption could be found in ruin, while across the street, two teenagers exchanged stolen jewelry for a bag of powder. Loyalty, faith, hope, all of it traded for survival. Detective Armand Velez drove through the storm, windshield wipers smearing the city's reflection across glass. The case files on the passenger seat were soaked, but the names were clear. DeMarco, Vega, Torres, and now Isabella Cruz. He didn't understand what she had to do with the recent killings, but her name kept resurfacing like something the ocean refused to bury. He stopped the car outside the burned remains of a warehouse near Viceport. The rain hissed as it hit the twisted metal. In the center of the wreckage lay a single playing card, the King of Hearts. The ink had run from the water, leaving only the outline of a man wearing a crown, staring back at himself upside down. Isabella sat in the dark of her apartment, staring at the flickering television that wasn't even plugged in. Her hands trembled as she poured herself another drink. The city hummed beyond her window. Cars, sirens, a baby crying somewhere far away. Vice was never silent. It whispered to her like an old lover. She had left Vincent once before, packed her things, disappeared into the mainland for a year. But somehow the city called her back. Maybe because she knew too much. Maybe because she missed the way the rain smelled here. Sweet, electric, almost alive. Her phone buzzed. A text, no name. Just a line. "They know about the docks." She stared at it, heartbeat quickening. Then she looked at the framed photo on her dresser, her and Vincent, years ago, smiling beneath a red sunset. That day he had promised her the city. She hadn't realized he meant its ghosts. Midnight. The docks were lit by spotlights and sirens. Shadows moved between shipping containers, gun barrels glinting under the rain. The first shots came fast, muffled by the storm. Shouts followed, echoing through the metal maze. Raul fired from behind a crate, breath sharp, eyes burning. "They set us up," he yelled into the chaos. "The cops were already here." Vincent ducked behind a stack of boxes, blood on his sleeve. "Who told them?" Before Raul could answer, a grenade rolled between their feet. The explosion threw them both back into the water. When Vincent came to, the sea was black and endless. He crawled onto the shore, coughing salt and blood. Behind him, the docks were on fire. Sirens screamed through the storm, but no one was coming for him. He stumbled up the sand, drenched and shaking, and collapsed beside a broken lifeguard tower. His hands trembled as he lit another cigarette. The flame reflected in his eyes like a confession. He didn't realize someone was watching him from the boardwalk. Detective Velez stood under the awning of a closed cafe, soaked to the bone. Through the haze, he could see DeMarco's silhouette, the Kingpin, half dead and half god, rising from his own wreckage. For a moment, Velez hesitated. This was what he'd been chasing for years. And yet, the man in the sand didn't look like a monster. He looked human, broken. Lightning flashed again, and DeMarco was gone. Just footprints in the sand, washing away with the tide. The next morning, the papers called it a gang dispute. 10 dead, 3 missing. No mention of DeMarco. No mention of the docks. The Mirage reopened that night as if nothing had happened. The city forgot fast. It always did. But Isabella didn't. She showed up at Velez's office unannounced, eyes red, coat dripping with rain. "You want him?" she asked. "I can give him to you." Velez leaned back, studying her. "Why now?" She smiled faintly. "Because I finally stopped believing in ghosts." At the same time, in the penthouse above Ocean Drive, Vincent poured himself another drink. His reflection in the window looked older, harder. He knew the game had changed. Someone inside had flipped, someone close. Raoul entered quietly, bandaged and limping. "You think it was the cops?" Vincent shook his head. "No, they don't move like that. This was business." He set his glass down slowly, and business only ends one way. Raoul hesitated. "You think Isabella—" Vincent turned sharply. "Don't!" But the hesitation was enough, a seed planted in blood and suspicion. Night fell like a blade. Velez followed Isabella to a motel on the outskirts of Viceport. The sign buzzed with failing light. VAC NCY. She moved like someone carrying a secret too heavy to hold. In room 17, she opened a small metal case and slid it across the table. Inside, ledgers, transaction codes, photos, the kind that could burn an empire. Velez stared. "Where did you get these?" She didn't answer, just whispered. "He kept everything, even the things that could destroy him." "Why give them to me?" "Because I want to see what's left of him when the city takes everything back." Vincent knew something was wrong when he saw the unmarked car outside his building. Years of instinct made him move before thought caught up. He slipped through the back corridor, grabbed his gun, and took the service elevator down. On the first floor, a guard lay unconscious. The elevator doors opened to the underground garage. Silent, empty except for the hum of fluorescent light. A voice echoed. "You running, Vincent?" Velez stepped from the shadows, gun raised. Vincent smiled. "Detective, you finally made it to the end." "Where's Raoul?" "Dead," Vincent said simply. "Loyalty doesn't last long in this town." Velez's finger tightened on the trigger. "You burned half the city, and the other half deserved it." Before he could speak again, a shot rang out, not from Velez's gun, but from behind him. Isabella stood in the doorway, smoke curling from her pistol. Her face was pale, eyes hollow. Vincent froze. "What did you do?" She didn't move. "You said loyalty was everything. I just wanted to see what that really meant." Velez fell to the floor, clutching his shoulder. Vincent took a step toward her. "You were never supposed to be part of this." Her voice cracked. "I already was." For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Rain hammering on concrete, the hum of electricity, the distant sirens. Then Isabella turned and disappeared into the storm. Vincent stared after her, chest tightening. He could feel the city shifting beneath his feet, something irreversible breaking loose. Velez groaned, pressing his wound. "She played you, DeMarco. She played us both." Vincent crouched beside him, voice low. "No, she just told the truth." "What truth?" Vincent looked toward the open door, the rain beyond it glowing with blue light. "That none of us were ever in control." The rain kept falling. The streets gleamed with fire and reflection. Vice City pulsed like a fever dream, alive, haunted, unrepentant. Somewhere offshore, a freighter exploded, sending a column of flame into the night. The shockwave rippled through the bay, scattering gulls and memories alike. In the glass of the Mirage, Vincent's reflection stared back. Fractured, ghost-like. For the first time in his life, he saw what he really was. Not a king, not a savior. Just another sinner the city had promised everything before taking it all back. And in that moment, with the sound of sirens growing louder, he understood. The city didn't destroy people. It revealed them, and Vice City was done pretending. The rain didn't stop for 3 days. It fell in sheets so heavy that even the neon couldn't cut through it, turning Vice City into a watercolor of ghosts and headlights. Every surface shimmered with the city's reflection, pink, blue, blood red, colors of a paradise that had long since rotted from the inside. Vincent DeMarco hadn't slept since the docks. He moved through his penthouse like a man already dead. The world outside blurred into static. The empire was crumbling, but he couldn't tell if it was because of the cops, the competition, or himself. On the table beside him lay a half-empty glass and a gun he hadn't yet decided how to use. Down below, Ocean Drive was alive with rain-slick sinners. Women in wet fur coats laughed beneath flickering lights. Engines growled. Sirens wove through the sound of thunder. Somewhere in that noise, Vincent could hear the city whispering. Not words, but the familiar hum of inevitability. He picked up the phone, called no one, then set it back down. The silence that followed felt heavier than gunfire. Detective Velez sat in a hospital bed, shoulder bandaged, body stiff with morphine and regret. The bullet had missed the artery by inches, but his faith hadn't been as lucky. He stared at the rain beyond the window and thought about the sound of Isabella's gun. Every case he ever took had ended the same, truth twisted, justice bought and sold. But something about this one was different. DeMarco wasn't just another criminal. He was the mirror the city didn't want to look into. A nurse came in and changed the IV. "You should rest," she said softly. Velez gave a dry laugh. "No one rests in Vice." In Little Havana, Raul Vega's funeral went unnoticed. The coffin was cheap, the priest drunk, the mourners few. The rain beat down on the casket like it wanted to be heard. Among the few in attendance was an old woman who didn't cry. She simply placed a folded letter on the lid and walked away. Inside that letter was a name, one that would never make it into any police report. Vincent's. By the time Vincent returned to the Mirage, the city had started to forget him. His face no longer owned the front pages. His men no longer picked up his calls. The neon sign outside buzzed with half-lit letters. Mir, AG. The rest burned out. He stood at the bar and stared at the empty stage where Isabella once sang. The memory played like an echo. Her voice, the slow curve of light across her face, the crowd holding its breath between notes. He poured himself a drink, raised it to the empty room. "To loyalty," he said, and drank it down. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered. Isabella drove along the causeway, headlights cutting through the storm. The wind off the ocean howled through the cracks of her window. Her hands gripped the wheel too tightly. Every time she blinked, she saw Vincent's eyes at the docks, that mix of confusion and hurt that made her wish she hadn't pulled the trigger. But guilt didn't change the city. It just fed it. The radio crackled. A man's voice. "Breaking news. Reports of multiple explosions near Viceport. Unconfirmed links to the DeMarco cartel. Authorities urge all civilians to avoid the downtown area." She turned the radio off. Her reflection in the glass was split by raindrops. "Don't pretend you didn't choose this," she whispered to herself. The storm reached the mainland by nightfall. Lightning crawled over the skyline like veins of fire. Whole blocks lost power. The hum of the city became a low growl, restless, hungry, waiting for blood. Velez limped out of the hospital against orders. He carried a file under his arm and a gun in his pocket. He'd learned enough to know that DeMarco wasn't running. He was waiting. And if the city was about to fall, he intended to be there when it did. He stopped by the pier, where the air smelled of salt and ash. The water churned violently. A single yacht bobbed in the distance, its lights flickering like a dying heartbeat. Somewhere on that yacht, he knew, was the man who'd built his kingdom on sand. Vincent was already there. The yacht drifted out from the dock, engines silent. The storm wrapped around it like a curtain. He stood at the bow, coat whipping in the wind, staring at the skyline vanishing behind sheets of rain. He had built this life with fire and blood. Every deal, every betrayal a step closer to the throne. But now, with everything collapsing, the throne looked more like a tomb. His reflection shimmered in the rain-streaked glass, a king without a kingdom. He whispered to the night, maybe it was never mine to keep. The rain turned to fury. Waves smashed against the pier, and the city's sirens screamed through the wind. In the chaos, Isabella found herself back where it all began. The mirage. The doors creaked open under her hand, the air inside thick with dust and memory. She walked across the darkened floor, her heels echoing softly. The spotlight above the stage flickered once, twice, then burned to life. She stood beneath it, closed her eyes, and began to hum the song that started everything. Her voice trembled but didn't break. Outside, thunder rolled, and for a moment, Vice City held its breath. Valaise's car hydroplaned on the bridge. He gripped the wheel, headlights cutting through the downpour. The police radio on the seat beside him crackled with overlapping voices. Explosion near Vice Beach. Gunfire reported at the Mirage. Repeat. Gunfire at the Mirage. He pressed harder on the accelerator. Of course, he muttered. Of course it ends where it began. Lightning split the sky in two. Inside the Mirage, the lights flickered again, not from electricity, but from muzzle flashes. A squad of men in black flooded the stage, guns drawn. Vincent stepped out of the shadows, soaked and silent. His eyes met Isabella's across the room. "Move," one of the men shouted. "Hands where I can see them." Vincent didn't move. Isabella's voice cracked through the tension. "Don't, Vincent." He smiled faintly. "You came back. To stop you." He shook his head. "No one ever stops anything in this city." Then the shooting started. Glass exploded. Bullets tore through the bar, shredding bottles and dreams alike. Vincent dove behind a column, returning fire with the calm precision of a man who'd been doing it all his life. The room filled with smoke and thunder. When it ended, the silence was worse than the gunfire. Bodies lay scattered across the floor. The rain poured through the broken ceiling, mixing with blood. Vincent staggered to his feet, clutching his side. Across the room, Isabella knelt beside one of the wounded men. Velez. He'd arrived too late, as always. "Leave him," Vincent said, voice strained. She looked up at him, eyes filled with something between hatred and sorrow. "You don't get to tell me what to do anymore." Vincent's hand tightened around the gun. For a second, neither moved. The sound of the rain filled the space between them like a heartbeat. Then Velez coughed, blood flecking his lips. "You think this ends tonight?" he rasped. "You're wrong. The city doesn't care who wins, it just takes." Vincent stared at him, then at Isabella. Something broke in his expression, the last piece of a man realizing what he'd become. He dropped the gun. Lightning struck the rooftop. The power died completely. Only the neon outside, fractured, pulsing through the rain, gave the room its shape. Vincent's voice was barely audible. "You wanted the truth? Here it is. I didn't build this empire for money or control. I built it because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" Isabella whispered. He looked toward the window, where the storm raged over the city he once ruled. Of being forgotten. The thunder answered for her. Outside, the sirens grew louder, dozens of them. Blue and red lights carved through the rain, drawing closer to the Mirage. Helicopters hovered like circling vultures. Velez tried to stand, leaning on the bar for support. "They're coming for you," he said. "Both of you." Vincent didn't look away from the window. "No," he murmured. "They're coming for what's left of Vice." The three of them stood there, the king, the ghost, and the law, surrounded by ruin. The sound of approaching engines filled the silence like a warning. Isabella stepped forward, voice trembling. Vincent, there's still time. He smiled, tired, hollow, almost gentle. Time's the only thing we never had. The doors outside rattled. The storm peaked. For a moment it felt as if the entire city paused. The rain, the thunder, the heartbeat of Vice itself, holding its breath before the collapse. Vincent turned to Isabella, eyes calm now, almost serene. "You remember what I told you once?" he said softly. "That every king dies twice, once when his crown falls, and again when his name fades." She nodded slowly. He stepped closer, hand brushing hers for the last time. "Then tonight," he whispered, "let me die the first death." And as the sound of sirens crashed against the doors and the storm swallowed the city whole, Vice held its breath. The doors burst open. Sirens screamed through the broken windows, the red-blue pulse bleeding into the room like veins of fire. Rain and wind tore through the mirage, knocking over bottles, curtains, memories. Cops in black tactical armor flooded in, shouting orders no one heard. Vincent didn't move. He stood there in the ruined light, calm as the eye of a hurricane. The world around him disintegrated, gun barrels flashing, shouts echoing, glass raining down. And still he didn't move. His hand hovered near the gun he'd dropped, the one lying between him and everything that was left. Velez leaned against the bar, struggling to keep his feet. His voice was hoarse. "Vincent, don't." Vincent looked at him, not as an enemy, but as a man who understood. "It's too late to stop anything now, Detective." Isabella's hair was plastered to her face, her dress torn from the chaos. She stepped between them, trembling. "No more," she said. "No more death." Vincent's eyes softened for the first time in years. "That's all this city ever gave us." Then someone fired. It was impossible to tell who shot first, a cop, a guard, a ghost. The room exploded in sound. The mirrors shattered, spraying diamonds across the floor. Vincent dove for cover, gun in hand, returning fire with desperate precision. Velez hit the ground, glass cutting into his palms. Isabella screamed as the bar splintered beside her. Smoke filled the air, thick and acrid. The storm outside howled like something alive. For every shot fired, the thunder answered. Vincent crawled through the haze, every breath raw. He could see the silhouettes of the cops moving through the smoke, mechanical, unthinking, faceless. One by one they dropped, silent. The room reeked of cordite and rain, and then it was over. Silence, heavy and unkind. Only the rain dared to move. Vincent stumbled to his feet, chest heaving, guns slick with blood. He looked around the room, bodies sprawled like broken promises, light flickering on the wet floor. Velez was alive, barely, slumped against the counter. His eyes were glassy but aware. "You could have walked away," he said quietly. "You had the money, the power. You could have vanished." Vincent laughed weakly. "And go where? The city would have followed. It always does." He turned to Isabella, standing in the center of the room. Her eyes met his, wide and wet. "You still think I can be saved?" he asked. She didn't answer. She just shook her head. Outside, the helicopters circled closer. Spotlights swept through the broken windows, slicing across the ruins of the mirage. The light caught Vincent's face, the blood on his hands. For a moment, the entire world seemed to hold him in its gaze. And he smiled, a strange, serene smile, like a man who'd finally stopped pretending. Velez's radio crackled on the floor beside him. "Team Bravo, status report," someone barked. "Suspect located? Over." Vincent looked down at it, then up at the shattered glass where the storm raged. "You know what they'll do if I surrender," he said. Velez's hand shook. "Maybe you deserve it. Maybe." Vincent looked away. "But I'm not giving them a story they can sell." He walked to the window, lightning flashing behind him, turning his silhouette into something mythic, part man, part legend, part sin. Isabella stepped forward. "Vincent, please." He turned to her, voice low. "You said you wanted to see what loyalty meant. This is it." He reached into his jacket. Isabella's breath caught. But instead of the gun, he pulled out a small silver locket, the one she thought she'd lost years ago. Inside, the photo, the two of them on Ocean Drive, young and unbroken, sunlight caught in their smiles. He pressed it into her hand. "Keep it, so you'll remember what the city took." She tried to speak, but her throat closed around the words. Then came the voice from the loudspeaker outside. "Vincent DeMarco, drop your weapon and step outside with your hands up." Vincent looked toward the broken doors. The storm framed him like a painting. Velez's voice cracked. "Vincent, don't make them shoot." Vincent smiled faintly. They already did. He stepped into the rain. The light hit him full in the face, blinding white. The downpour turned his blood to watercolor. The street below was lined with SWAT trucks, police cars, riot shields. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Even the city seemed to hesitate. Then Vincent raised his hands, slowly, calmly. The world seemed to stop breathing. And then, a single shot. No one saw where it came from. No one ever does. Vincent staggered, the sound of thunder swallowing everything else. Isabella screamed from inside the mirage. Velez dragged himself toward the window, too late. Vincent fell to his knees, rain and blood blending beneath him. He looked up at the sky, the same sky that had watched him build and burn everything. He whispered something no one could hear. Then he fell forward into the streetlight's glow. The sirens never stopped. Even as they carried him away, even as the rain washed the blood from the pavement, Vice City kept moving. Cars honked. Music played. Somewhere down the coast, fireworks went off for a party that would never end. Isabella stood in the doorway, soaked and shaking. She clutched the locket to her chest, staring at the shape of him disappearing beneath the flashing lights. Velez limped beside her, hand pressed to his wound, face pale as ash. "Is it over?" she asked. He didn't answer. He just looked at her, then at the city, and saw that neither of them would ever stop bleeding. Days passed. The news called it justice. The headlines said Vice City Kingpin killed in police standoff. Reporters replayed the footage 1,000 times, his silhouette in the rain, the shot, the fall. They turned it into legend before the body went cold. But Velez knew better. He'd been there. He'd seen the look in Vincent's eyes. That strange peace. That quiet acceptance. He sat alone in his apartment, cigarette smoke curling toward the ceiling. The city hummed below, the same as ever. Nothing really changed. It never did. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out the case file. DeMarco's name was written across it in fading ink. He hesitated for a long time, then struck a match and burned it. The ashes curled and vanished. Isabella left the city 2 nights later. She drove across the bridge at dawn, the skyline fading in her rearview mirror. The rain had stopped. The ocean glowed with soft pink light, calm and endless. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay. The locket hung around her neck, cool against her skin. When the sun rose behind her, it painted the water gold. For the first time in years, she felt something close to quiet. But she couldn't help glancing back. The city looked beautiful from a distance, glittering, innocent, almost kind. But she knew better. Vice City never died. It just waited for its next king. In the ruins of the Mirage, rainwater dripped through the ceiling onto the broken floor. The neon sign outside sparked once, twice, and flickered out completely. Somewhere in the dark, a lighter clicked. A shadow moved. A man's silhouette, limping, face unseen. He picked up a discarded gun, wiped the rain from its barrel, and tucked it under his coat. The sound of the ocean filled the silence. Then the figure turned toward the door and disappeared into the night. On the horizon, thunder rolled again. Not the sound of the storm, but the sound of something returning. Vice City slept, restless and radiant, unaware that the cycle had begun again. The lies, the greed, the love, the violence, all of it waiting for new names, new faces, new ghosts. And somewhere, deep beneath the hum of the neon, a voice whispered through the static of memory, "You can't kill what was never alive." The rain began again, soft and endless, washing the blood from the streets as if cleansing the city for its next sin. And in that silence, in that breath between destruction and rebirth, Vice City kept its secret. Something eternal had shifted. But the story wasn't over. The rain fell softer now, like the city was trying to wash away what it couldn't forget. Dawn crept over the ocean in bruised shades of violet and ash, and the skyline, that glittering cathedral of sin and ambition, glowed faintly against the dying storm. The neon light still flickered half-dead, stubborn against the morning. The mirage stood in ruins, silent and skeletal, the last monument to a kingdom built on shadows. A police tape fluttered across the entrance, yellow and meaningless, whispering in the wind like a confession no one heard. On the streets below, the world moved as if nothing had happened. Cars rolled by, vendors opened shop. Tourists returned to the boardwalk, laughing, pointing, pretending the gunfire had been fireworks. Vice City always did that, swallowed its dead and smiled through the blood. Somewhere offshore, gulls screamed over the water, their voices carrying across the empty horizon. The ocean didn't care who had ruled the night. It had seen it all before. In a cheap motel on the edge of Little Havana, Detective Velez woke from a dream he couldn't remember. The room smelled of smoke and rain. His badge sat on the nightstand beside an untouched glass of whiskey, catching the weak light from the blinds. He sat there for a long time, staring at the floor, his chest aching where the bullet had grazed him weeks ago. The doctor said it healed clean. The rest of him hadn't. He turned on the small radio beside the bed. The static hummed like an old friend. Then came the news. Another shooting, another deal gone wrong, another kid dead in the alley behind a nightclub. Velez closed his eyes. Different names, same story. He thought of Vincent, the man he'd hunted, the man he'd admired, the man he'd killed. Some nights he wondered if Vincent had really died that night, or if he'd just dissolved into the city, the way ghosts do when they've told their story. Maybe that's what Vice City did to everyone. It took your sins, your secrets, your love, and it turned them into static on the airwaves. Noise and memory, replaying forever. Across the city, Isabella sat at the edge of a pier, her feet bare, the locket resting against her collarbone. The water shimmered beneath her, gentle and endless. She had driven south until she ran out of road, and still she couldn't leave. Something in the city called her back every time. Not his face, not the memories, but the unfinished truth. She opened the locket. The photo inside had begun to fade, the colors bleeding into the metal like watercolor. Two people smiling in the sunlight, long before they learned what the city truly was. She whispered his name, though she wasn't sure why. Maybe to forgive, maybe to remember, maybe just to keep the silence from swallowing her whole. Behind her, a radio played faintly from a fisherman's truck. The voice on it was calm, almost reverent, a late-night DJ speaking about the ghosts that haunt the coastline, voices in the static that call sailors home. She smiled faintly. Maybe Vice City had its ghosts too. Maybe they never really left. On the other side of the city, beneath the orange flicker of a broken streetlight, a man walked alone. His coat collar was turned up against the rain. His limp was slight but noticeable. Every few steps, he'd pause to light a cigarette, the flame painting his face in red for an instant before vanishing into smoke. He moved past burned-out cars, closed clubs, silent beaches. The wind carried a low hum, the rhythm of the city still beating beneath the surface. He stopped at a payphone, picked up the receiver and held it to his ear. No dial tone, just static. He listened anyway, his expression unreadable. Then he whispered something, a name, a prayer, a promise, and walked away, disappearing into the blur of traffic and rain. Maybe it was Vincent. Maybe it was just another shadow wearing his memory. In Vice City, those things were hard to tell apart. By noon, the ocean shimmered silver as the clouds broke apart, letting light fall across the skyline. The skyscrapers caught it, holding it like glass wounds, reflecting it back to the heavens in fractured beams. Velez drove to the beach later that morning. He parked where the sand met the broken concrete and watched the horizon fade into blue. He thought of turning in his badge, thought of leaving the city the way she did. But the truth was, he didn't know who he'd be anywhere else. Vice City made its own kind of gravity. Once it had you, it never let go. He took out a small tape recorder from his coat pocket, the same one he'd used years ago, back when he was still idealistic enough to believe in justice. He pressed record. His voice came out low, tired, steady. Vice City, 1988 to 1992, the rise and fall of Vincent DeMarco. They'll call it crime. They'll call it tragedy. But maybe it was something else. Maybe it was fate wearing a cheap suit. He stopped the tape, looked out at the water. Maybe we were all guilty, he whispered. Maybe we still are. He left the recorder on the hood of the car and walked toward the ocean until the waves reached his knees. The tide was cold, pulling and forgiving all at once. When he looked back, the car was a small black shape against the wide, indifferent sky. The tape kept rolling. Just the sound of wind and waves and a city breathing in the distance. A woman's voice joined in faintly, Isabella's, soft, almost an echo. He used to say the city was alive, she murmured. Maybe he was right. Her voice faded. The tape clicked off. The rest of the day passed like a ghost, slow, luminous, empty. People filled the streets by evening. Music rose from the clubs again. Laughter returned, shallow but convincing. The neon lights flickered back on, painting the wet pavement pink and blue. The mirage was boarded up, forgotten. Yet its reflection still shimmered in puddles along Ocean Drive, as if the building refused to die completely. On the radio, a familiar song played, the same one that had echoed through the club the night everything fell apart. It sounded different now, slower, sadder. Somewhere in the verse, you could almost hear the ocean breathing beneath it. And if you listened closely, if you stood very still, you might hear another sound too. The faint rhythm of footsteps walking away toward the edge of the city where the rain meets the sea. Maybe that's how legends end. Not with a gunshot, but with a man walking into the horizon, his sins dissolving behind him. Maybe that's how Vice City forgives you. By forgetting your name. The last light of the day slipped beneath the waterline, turning the waves to molten gold. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of salt and smoke across the boulevard. Somewhere, a siren wailed and then faded. Somewhere, a new deal was being made. Another lie born, another king rising. The cycle continued. It always did. The camera would pull back now, if there were one, up above the rooftops, past the billboards, the highways, the endless sprawl of light, until the city looked small enough to fit inside a single tier. From up here, the neon looks beautiful. From up here, you can't see the blood. Vice City breathes on, restless, radiant, and damned, a dream no one can wake from. Maybe that's the real curse of it all. Not that it kills you, but that it remembers you forever. So tell me, if loyalty is just another word for survival, and survival another word for sin, what does that make the ones who never left? And if the city could speak, what would it say about the people who built their empires on its sand? The rain started again, soft and endless. The waves erased the footprints from the shore. Only the sound remained, that low hum of a city caught between desire and decay. And somewhere, faint but certain, a voice whispered into the dark. This was Vice City's final hour. Like, subscribe, and share this story. Tell me in the comments what you think really happened that night in Vice City.